But Brandon, we are moving on into our third topic, and we're talking about a guy that you love. And you know what? Do you love him or do you just like him?
I like him a lot.
Okay,
He's got some great talent.
I don't want to put some words in your mouth, but we're talking about Saqoun Barkley, the running back for the Penn State Nittany Lions, and basically we're trying to answer the question, Brandon, of will Saqoun Barkley win the 2017 Heisman Trophy? And coming out of this week into week 6, 574 rushing yards, his longest is 80 yards, 5.7 per carry, 4 tutties. He's got 386 receptions, 2 tutties. He's got 8 kick returns for 258 yards and a touchdown that he got this past weekend. And he also has a completed pass 1-for-1 with a perfect passer rating, 16 yards on that pass.
And a touchdown.
I will ask you, yeah, that was a touchdown. So is he the Heisman in your eyes? Will he be the 2017 Heisman Trophy winner at the end of the year?
Ricky, right now, absolutely. I think absolutely yes. I mean, this kid has continued to get better and better each and every season. Each and every season. He's the leading rusher for his team. He's the leading receiver in terms of catches and yards on his team. This guy does it all. He does it all. And the fact that now, kind of where were we at the beginning of the season when we did our kind of preview for the Heisman watch? I think Sam Darnold was up there, correct? For me, I think he was. Mason Rudolph was my number one guy, but I think that he's kind of fallen off. Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson for you. I mean, he's had some really good games, but he hasn't been the Lamar Jackson I think that we saw last year. For me, it's got to be Saqoun Barkley because he's been consistently good and making a difference each and every single game that he's played in. I mean, he's been great. I mean, the way this guy runs, the way this guy can just do it all.
Kind of like a modern day Booby Miles.
Yeah, there you go.
He's got to get my Booby Miles references in there.
He's just such a talented player. I don't know how you don't have him as your number one right now in the Heisman, because it's not like he's just a quarterback. And I know that so many times that's who's winning it is a quarterback. But this guy has done it all. I mean, the fact that he's thrown a pass for a touchdown is outstanding. That's incredible. He's doing it all and more. And right now, if you say he's not the Heisman, I would have to fully disagree.
Well, at this point in the year, he's the Heisman. However, I am still...
We've got a lot of games left?
Well, not that. I feel like I'm going to put an asterisk next to Saqoun Barkley because I feel like there's only one player in college football that could catch him. One. And I know who I'm going to say.
It's going to be Lamar Jackson.
It's Lamar Jackson.
It's going to be Lamar Jackson. You've been all over him for years.
But the reason why I say that is right now, I'm not saying Lamar Action Jackson's the Heisman Trophy winner because he has to be different from last year. And the biggest difference from Lamar Jackson that is why he's not up at the top of the Heisman race so far this year is when you look at his quarterback stats, just passing, I'm not looking at rushing right now. They are very similar touchdown to interception from last year through 5 games. Last year, he had 14 touchdowns through this many games, only 4 INTs. This year, 13 touchdowns, 3 INTs. The big difference, though, with Lamar Jackson is if you look so far through 5 games, he only has 5 rushing touchdowns. Whereas last year, Charlotte, he had 2. Syracuse, he added another 4. That's 6. Florida State, he added another 4 on the ground. That is 10. Against Marshall, he added another 2. That's 12. And then Clemson, he added another 2. That's 13. So at this point through last year, he had 14 touchdowns through the air, but he had just as many, if not more, rushing touchdowns. That's not the case this year. And you could say it's a combination of him trying to be used differently because he realized that he can't do it all on his own and he can't do it all with his legs, Or you can say they've gotten tape on him. Like teams, especially in the conference, have tape on Lamar Jackson against them so they can use that when they go ahead and play him. However, I put that asterisk there because he's the only guy in this kind of slew of quarterbacks, of players, that if he wants to turn it on, could turn it on. And if he goes back to the Lamar Jackson that we saw last year, then he could win the Heisman from Saquon. But right now, like, it seems like Saqoun Barkley, I know they have Swarley, and I don't want to disrespect Swarley when I say this, but without Saqoun Barkley, the Nittany Lions are nowhere near as good as they are. They're nowhere near as good as they are because he's a back that does it all. You need a guy to run the ball, he'll run the ball. You need a guy to catch the ball in the backfield, he'll catch the ball out of the backfield. You need a guy to kick return for you, he'll kick return for you as well. This is going to be the guy who if he comes out this year, the first running back taken off the board and could be the Heisman Trophy winner when he's selected in the NFL draft.
Well, I just want to say again, too, so he didn't have a great day on the ground this past week. He only had 20 carries, 56 yards, but the fact that he was able to make a difference in other areas, and it wasn't in the receiving game and it wasn't in the running game, throws a touchdown and then a kickoff return for a touchdown. Just the fact that he's able, again, like we said, to do it all. He's such a multi-dimensional player. That's something that's what you want to have for your team. That's a guy who's a difference maker for your team.
Yeah.
Then you go back and you look at the game against Iowa. I mean, guy has over 200 yards on the ground. He has a big touchdown before halftime. And then he's able to really keep things chugging along for Penn State because he was also the leading receiver with 12 catches for 94 yards. He's making a difference in every single game that he's in, whether it's on the ground, through the air, making catches, throwing the football, returning the football. That's what makes him him. That's what makes him Saqoun Barkley. That's what makes him so good. And I think that that's one of the reasons why you look at him and you go, okay, this is why I think that he's the Heisman, should be in the lead for the Heisman right now, is because you look at his team and he means so much to his team. You can also say, though, that Lamar Jackson means a lot to his team. Lamar Jackson won it last year. I think that's one of the things. If you look back at it, Saqoun Barkley, with his statistics, he probably could have won it last year as well. I think right now Barkley has an edge because of his importance for his team and everything that he does at all those different positions. I mean, he can play many.
Now, the thing I want to ask you about is right now I just pulled up different different players that different people are seeing for the Heisman race right now. And right now I'm looking at PennLive.com. And this is a website that really is Pennsylvania, so it might be a little blue tinted, but I hope not, where they said that the top 5 for them, last week's top 5 after these games, is Barkley, Mayfield, Jackson, Darnold, Rudolph, second tier, Browning, Bryce Love.
Actually, I'm going to have you do that again. You went through those really fast. Go a little slower.
Saqoun Barkley, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold, Mason Rudolph. Last week's top 5. Second tier, though, Jake Browning, Bryce Love, running back at Stanford, McSorley, quarterback at Penn State, Rashad Penny, running back at San Diego State, Josh Rosen, quarterback at UCLA. And here's the question that they are asking, is there is a guy, I mentioned him, he's at Stanford, Bryce Love. And this past week against Arizona State, 301 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns on the ground, but he did not impact the receiving game. He had 0 receptions, 0 yards, did everything on the ground. So far this year, if we're looking, and I'm just going to say because they're running backs, let's look just at the rushing totals. He's not only doubling Saqoun Barkley in yards, where Barkley is just under 600, whereas Bryce Love, okay, just under double. He's got 1,088, but he's doubling them in touchdowns. Barkley has 4. Bryce Love has 8. Both of these guys are juniors. Do you see maybe could Bryce Love at Stanford be a guy to challenge Saqoun Barkley? Because the last running back to win the trophy, to win the Heisman Trophy, the stiff arm trophy, was Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry, the year he won it, 2,219 rushing yards and 28 touchdowns. That's the kind of stat line that you had. He only had 91 receiving yards on 11 catches with Alabama. I know it's a different team, but that's kind of the stat line Henry had to win the Heisman.
Ricky, let's go back to something that we talked about again when we talked about the Heisman Trophy.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about this past preseason.
When we talk about the Heisman Trophy, when we talked about it in the preseason, there's going to be guys who will get snubbed from it because their team is not watched by the majority of the country. Is the majority of the country watching a Stanford game at 9 o'clock at night? They're not. They're just not.
Well, they were last year because of Christian McCaffrey.
The primetime, sure. The primetime game at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock where Penn State's going to be playing, or let's say even at 6 o'clock on Saturday night or 7:30, that's the game that people are going to be watching. They're going to be tuning in. And where Stanford fall in the rankings? Where does Penn State fall in the rankings? Now, should these things be factors? We've talked about this so many times. No, probably not. I think a lot of people as many people that were happy with Derrick Henry winning the Heisman Trophy and believed that he deserved it, there seemed to be just as many people on the other side that thought, oh, Christian McCaffrey should get it, but since everyone's asleep by that time or they're not watching, they've tuned out of college football for the day, that's why he didn't get it. And I think that they make a decent argument, and they bring up a really good point, and they're right. They're just right. I mean, by that time, by 9 o'clock at night, I am busy doing something else, asleep, or just, kind of done with college football for the day, unless it's just like a premier game I need to be watching.
Unless you're on the West Coast, but you're not. I know.
I'm not.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if someone's the same way on the West Coast, it's not that late for them.
Exactly. But when you're looking then at the rest of the country, though, I mean, maybe your West Coast
voters
the
East Coast.
Maybe your West Coast voters are getting that, but your Midwest, your East Coast, it's just not happening. I don't think that there's any way that the kid from Stanford is going to be able to get his name way up there into the Heisman watch, only because 1, 2, and I'm not saying this. I'm saying this because this is just a thought that I have. Is that you can be one-dimensional running back, just run the football, and win it, clearly, Derrick Henry. But he was on Alabama. This guy's on Stanford. That's my thought. That's my 2 cents on that point. Saqoun Barkley, he's a guy who's doing it all, and he's on number 4 ranked Penn State, and they play their games in prime time. Or at times when people are going to be certainly watching college football on Saturday. You
know what's very interesting?
What?
I'm looking at the Heisman voting, and last year we had quarterbacks galore. It was Jackson, Watson, Mayfield were the top 3. The first running back was Deonta Freeman at Texas, and he finished 8th in the voting. Christian McCaffrey finished 9th. And then we had Donnell Pumphrey, who finished 10th. Saqoun Barkley wasn't even on the board for that. We had a lot of quarterbacks, though, there with, like I said, Jackson, Watson, Mayfield. Browning was also in that voting. And I forgot Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was tied for 10 with Pumphrey. However, I look at 2015, and in the top 3, I see very similar characteristics of the top 3 players in stats that we could see this year. First off, Derrick Henry, the guy that won it. The guy where it's, I'm going to run the ball, I'm not going to be your receiver. Only had 11 receptions. And in this case, I'll look at Bryce Love to be that kind of a back this year. 98 carries so far through 4 or 5 games, depending on how many your team has played. Over 1,000 yards, averaging 11 yards per carry, 8 touchdowns. Only has 2 receptions this year.
And here's the problem. Mm-hmm. Those are great stats.
Yeah.
I mean, the kid's been good. You don't want to take anything away from him, and you're not taking anything away from him, but you're just saying that, I mean, let's be realistic about it. Mm-hmm. That's how things have seemed to go. If you're not on a team that's not doing you too much, I mean, how many times are we seeing the MVP, for baseball or, for football come from a team that, lost, 7 games or 8 games?
Look at Mike Trout.
It's
been the MVP how many times, and how many times the Angels have made the playoffs with him?
But they're not a bottom-feeding team. They're not a bottom-feeding team.
I wouldn't say Stanford's a bottom-feeding. They're in the.
That's not what I'm saying, though. That's not what I'm saying.
Then I'm losing what you're saying.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the Angels have definitely been competitive to be able to try and get to the playoffs. Like, I mean, especially look at this year. It's not coming from a team at the bottom, and I'm not saying that Stanford's a bottom feeding team, but I'm saying more likely than not, you're seeing the MVP. People want the MVP. They want the Heisman to come from a team that's either been in the playoffs or that's been a team with a winning record that a lot of people have talked about throughout the year. That's what they want it to be. How many times have we talked about Stanford? How many times have people talked about Stanford this year? When I say people, I'm not talking about people that you listen to if you're a Stanford fan, but the overall general national coverage. That's where this conversation kind of gets held up.
Is it kind of like how people are talking about Aaron Judge being the MVP because of how much he's been in the spotlight this year and because he plays for the Yankees?
Absolutely.
Is that kind of the point you're going
Absolutely.
with?
Absolutely. That's the road I'm going down.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's a good thing. I'm just saying that's what history has kind of showed.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to make a case that, Bryce Love, Stanford, he has the same stat line as Derrick Henry. Put Bryce Love as your Heisman. The thing I'm getting at is I find it funny that I do agree with you that the more your team is in the spotlight, Alabama won the Heisman. Look at Marcus Mariota when he won it, how much Oregon was in the spotlight. I just find it interesting that at the end of the year, the top 3 in 2015, the last year we had a running back as the Heisman winner, Bryce Love fits the similar stat line to Derrick Henry. Saqoun Barkley could have a similar stat line to Christian McCaffrey, where it's not only do I run the ball, I can catch the ball too, and I can kick return too. I'm doing all these other things. And then Deshaun Watson, who finished with over 4,000 yards, 35 touchdowns, 13 INTs. Baker Mayfield right now, I want to say with over almost 1,500 yards, he's on pace for that kind, and he's 13 touchdowns, no INTs through 4 games at this point. I just look at those 3 candidates and I go, wow. Wouldn't it be something if 2015, those 3 types of players finished in the top 3 yet again with these 3? But I do agree with you. Saquon is my favorite right now to win because not only does he do a lot, he catches, he receives, he returns, but he's on a team that is going to be in the fight for a Big Ten title. It's going to be in the fight for a college football title, and everyone's talking about Penn State every week.
And let me tell you, this is so similar to how it goes for a team that's trying to get into the playoff because it's a team that does everything right, only has 1 loss, and they get to the playoff. You get to the point where it's okay. Playoff committee's talking. You're like, okay, I did everything right this season. We only had that 1 loss. Here's when it came. We feel like we're really, really good. And then all of a sudden we get snubbed because the committee this year went after, well, if you did this, like you said a couple of weeks ago, we're looking for the teams that didn't have any losses in October. during the days of this day to this day, and that's kind of how things went. It's kind of similar to the Heisman voting. It's okay, this year, Derrick Henry did really, really well because he had 28 touchdowns and lots of yards. Mm-hmm. That's really good. We could have gone with another guy too, but this year we wanted to go with this guy from Alabama because they're looking like one of those teams that's going to go all the way. So then another year it's going to be, okay, we really like this quarterback. He's been really flashy. You could go for so many different guys. It's really, I think, each year it's different on how it goes. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the same thing, but a way that I'm trying to compare it where Heisman voting, I think, is similar to the way that the committee ends up voting on what team ends up getting in, what team ends up getting out, staying out. Is they have their criteria, and I feel like sometimes it changes from year to year.
Well, and the one thing I will say is not saying he should have won it over these three, but another prime example is 2013, where our top three in the Heisman was Jameis Winston won it, A.J. McCarron was right behind him, Jordan Lynch from NIU was at third. Jordan Lynch, NIU, had almost 3,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and could also run the ball, much like Jameis Winston. But you look at that, NIU, they're not even a Power 5 team. I know that's different than this because Stanford and Penn State are both Power 5s, but kind of the same thing of how many people nationally were checking out NIU games every single week that were voting for the Heisman. How many of them were saying, let me see what Jordan Lynch did this week? And that's not a knock at NIU because they did really well that year, and Jordan Lynch did very well. That's why he finished in the top 3 in Heisman voting. But just that example of it does happen. They don't focus on your team. You don't get that exposure. They don't even know to vote for you sometimes, I feel, because they just don't. And I feel like some of the voters, it's kind of like tunnel vision, where it's like, hey, you know what? This is the guy I like. It's going to be very hard to sway me kind of a thing. And Bryce Love right now has the stats to be in the conversation, especially top 5, I would say. Yeah. But the thing is, are enough voters going to sway to like a Bryce Love over a Saqoun Barkley?
And Stanford right now, just at this point, is not even in the rankings. They're not even in the top 25. And again, I'm not saying that you need to be in the top 25.
Lynch, but they were in the rankings. That's the difference.
I mean, it's just it's not necessarily how it should be, but it's just how it's been.
Yeah, and this is where let's turn it on to you guys. Let us know what you guys think. Will Saqoun Barkley win the 2017 Heisman? And who are other guys, quarterbacks, wide receivers, and we didn't mention many wide receivers, defensive players, any players in college football that you think could dethrone him in the race to get the Heisman Trophy? Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section.